The Cybermen make their return to Doctor Who in the Moonbase. This is an episode that I don't tend to hear people talking about, much at all, but honestly, I thought it was great. I think that there's really a lot to like about this one, and I'm surprised that it isn't talked about more, if I'm being honest. So this episode takes place in the year 2070 on the moon, showing that the Doctor can almost control the TARDIS enough to get it landed onto the right planet, as he promised them Mars. So there is a moonbase, as you might expect given the title, and from it they control the weather of the Earth with a device called a gravitron. And inevitably, the Cybermen show up, and that's all I really need to tell you. What I like most about the episode is how well it handles the Cybermen, and I really do think that they are handled well. For the first half of this story, they aren't even talking, and I think that suited them really well. They were just this quiet presence in the background that would be doing ominous and dangerous things, made ever so effective by how they managed to do all of this stuff in the background. They were sort of a silent menace, and I thought it suited them really well. And when they did finally speak, I think it worked a lot better than last time. In the 10th Planet, their speech was kind of goofy, and while it was pretty easy for me to buy into it and enjoy the story, I didn't really get that in this one. Where previously they sometimes spoke clunkily and at times in ways that felt almost sing-songy, this time around they had a much more straightforward speech, and I liked it better. Just in general, I like just about everything that this story does for the Cybermen. I like how they feel so cold and calculating, from what they say to how they say it, but there are ways in which their humanity shows through. I think this happened in the 10th Planet as well, but here, I like how it plays better, because at times, they were almost too human in that story, but in the Moonbase, they show less of that humanity, which means that when it does come out, then it stands out a little more. So I like how well it balances in this story, and by humanity, I mean, for example, the way that they pick people up. You can tell that there was a human under there, and that works for this story, so I like that. But that's not every time they pick someone up, because at times, they carry them in such a robotic way. Man, I'm coming to really like these classic Cybermen quite a bit. They just really work for me well, especially in this story. Another thing that really added to not just the Cybermen, but to the whole episode, was the background noise. And I hesitate to call it music, but there was this noise that you can hear that sounds almost like a light breathing and really adds to the ambiance of this episode. I really mean that. This episode has a great atmosphere, and that's something I really enjoy in it. It's one of my favorite aspects of the story. Yeah, I think this is the first Base Under Siege episode of the Second Doctor era. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I don't think the previous stories qualified as one. It's always worth mentioning how much I've come to really enjoy Patrick Troughton as the Second Doctor. I'm glad to find out that he is a great Doctor and that I do really, really enjoy him in this part. He's so good in it, and in this story, we get to see a bit of the more serious side of him, which he is really good at, and we see how seriously he takes the Cybermen. And man, I just really am loving the Second Doctor, and I couldn't be happier about it. Also, I love that his coat is just a little bit too big for him. I just happen to think that's great. Also, I think I expressed this last time we saw the Cybermen, but I really don't think Polly has a lot to do. I think she's kind of useless. And I don't mean to come across too harsh, but that's just kind of how I feel. I remember that she said she could help, and she ended up making coffee in that episode, and she ended up making coffee in this one too. So yeah, she really isn't that crucial to the show at all. I'm sorry, Polly. It's probably worth mentioning that this episode is missing parts 1 and 3 of its 4-part story. It occurred to me I forgot to even mention that about the Underwater Menace. It's unfortunate that there are missing parts to this, but I do appreciate that it was animated for fans to be able to watch it and see it visually. I don't think that the animation is great, but I do think it is good enough. And I've seen so many of them animated that it's probably just natural for me to experience an episode like this, so I do really appreciate the animation, and it's pretty easy for me to follow it. I do think that it is pretty good animation, and it definitely works within this given story, and I'm very thankful to have it. In terms of how well did enjoy this one a lot, I think it resolves in a surprisingly good way. Actually, I don't think it Deus Ex Machinas at all, which I am really happy about that, because that can sometimes happen with this show. And I think it kind of happened a bit in the 10th Planet. In terms of how well it is spaced out, I don't think this story wastes much time. My minor complaint is that the first 10 minutes kind of waste time and aren't that interesting, but it quickly turns around, and I really don't know why people don't talk about this one more. I think it's great. Overall, I thought this was a great episode. It brought back the Cybermen even better than before, and had a really tight, engaging base under siege story. The Second Doctor is as great as ever, and fits perfectly into this wonderfully atmospheric story, one of the best stories so far, and I'm going to give the Moonbase a rating of 8.5 out of 10. If you join me again this coming Sunday, then I will be reviewing the Makra Terror. I have already seen it, and I will be bringing you my thoughts on it shortly, so be sure to let me know what you thought about this episode down below, and I will be happy to have a conversation with you, and I hope to see you around soon for my review of the Makra Terror, but if not, that's totally cool. Just know that I appreciate your time here today, and with that said, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and have a lovely week.